Tsukuyomi is a broken jutsu. Now, if you've seen Naruto before, you probably already think that. However, Tsukuyomi is even more broken than you think. It's one of those abilities that's not used a lot during the series, but it leaves a lasting impact. A genjutsu that, by making eye contact, in an instant, the caster can put you under an illusion which he controls completely, time, space, everything else, that can last several days or even weeks. We don't know the actual limits to it, but everything happens in a mere instant in the real world. It's an instant GG when you fight against someone, but we've seen that happening before. Itachi uses Tsukuyomi 3 times during the series. First against Kakashi, and he tortures Kakashi for 72 hours with physical torture. Of course, we know that only an instant passes in the real world, so much so that Asuma and Kurna are like, wait, what did you go down, Kakashi? What's going on? You just told us not to look at his eyes, but now you're down. And that put Kakashi, one of the strongest jonins in the Leaf Village, alongside Guy, I would say he's the strongest, in the hospital for weeks, or maybe even months, depending on how much time Jiraiya and Naruto took to find and bring Tsunade back to the village so that he could get her healing and wake up. The second time Itachi uses the ability is probably the most infamous one, against Sasuke when Sasuke was 12 years old. He put Sasuke under an illusion that shows his parents and the entire Uchiha clan dying over and over again, so there was just 24 hours of psychological torture. What do you think was worse, Kakashi's physical torture or Sasuke's psychological torture? I don't know. Kakashi's was longer, it was 3 days. Sasuke's just 1 day of torture. And obviously only a mere instant passed in the real world, but still they were both knocked out, and Tsunade was the only one that could bring them back. And that's the thing with Tsukuyomi, if you look into Itachi's eye, he can just cast it against you, and there isn't much you can do about it. If it's hard enough to counter basic Sharingan genjutsu, blocking or countering Tsukuyomi is practically impossible. You have no time to shake your chakra awake and break the genjutsu because the genjutsu itself only lasts for a mere instant in the real world, so even a perfect Jinchuriki that befriended his tail beast wouldn't be able to do that, because usually the tail beast would simply be able to break the Jinchuriki out of the genjutsu by shaking his chakra, but when Tsukuyomi only lasts for a mere instant, the tail beast itself is not gonna have time for that, and the Jinchuriki is gonna suffer everything under the illusion anyways. So the potential to defeat pretty much any enemy with that jutsu is absurd. After all, 72 hours is an arbitrary number that Itachi chose. After all, he didn't want to kill Kakashi, but it's very likely, and we're gonna get to that later when we analyze a few light novels, that Itachi could expand that time limit for the illusion and still make it be a mere instant in the real world, meaning the torture or whatever Itachi wants to show to the target could last much longer than just 3 days. The only feasible way a regular ninja would have to counter Tsukuyomi would be to absolutely not stare into Itachi's eyes, and that's not even a certainty because there are a few light novels that say that you don't even have to look at Itachi's eyes, he can just look at your eyes and send the chakra to your eyes and that's it. So you'd have to close your eyes, which would make fighting very difficult, unless you were a major sensory type ninja, which most ninjas aren't. But still, this is one of those statements that comes from light novels and data books that kind of contradicts everything that's said in the manga, because in the manga, it's very much understood that if you don't look at a Sharingan, it cannot cast a genjutsu on you. So you would be safe from Tsukuyomi if you don't look at Itachi's eyes, but he can make you stare into his eyes if he kind of puts himself in that position, and Itachi can also cast genjutsu with his fingers, so it's a nightmare to deal with Itachi. Now, if you actually look at Itachi's eyes and he casts Tsukuyomi against you, it's gonna be a GG unless you have a very powerful Sharingan to counter the genjutsu, and we actually see that happening in the 3rd time Itachi uses Tsukuyomi in the series, which is against Sasuke again, but now it's a much more powerful Sasuke. Naruto Shippuden, he was 16 years old and they were fighting to the death for Sasuke's revenge fight. Sasuke manages to use his base Sharingan enhanced by his curse mark to break out of the Tsukuyomi illusion. Now, usually, you would only be able to break out of Tsukuyomi or try to block it with another Mangekyou Sharingan, but as Zetsu, who's watching the fight between Sasuke and Itachi, states, well, the Sharingan is a shinobi tool. Its actual power depends on whoever is using it. A master using a stone can beat somebody using shuriken. And that's what he implies Sasuke did there. Even though his Sharingan is clearly inferior to Itachi's, his prowess over it allowed him to break out of Tsukuyomi. Now, some people say that Itachi let Sasuke break out of it, which is a fair argument. After all, Itachi didn't want to lose that fight at that specific moment, and we find out why later. He had to do a lot more things, mainly taking Orochimaru out of Sasuke's body in that fight. And if he just won the fight there with Tsukuyomi, then, well, Itachi wouldn't have achieved his goals. What Itachi wanted to do with that Tsukuyomi was to show Sasuke how to acquire an eternal Mangekyou Sharingan, because Itachi wanted to make sure that if Sasuke ever awakened the Mangekyou Sharingan, he would implant Itachi's eyes on himself and therefore gain a lot more power and not go blind like Itachi was going. And he also wanted to keep the facade that Itachi was an evil guy, that he wanted to take Sasuke's eye, which is something pretty damn screwed up if you think about it. So it all made sense. Well, Itachi wouldn't want to win here, so let Sasuke break out of it. However, it feels like Itachi was surprised when Sasuke managed to do that, and, well, I don't love data books or anything, but the data book states that Sasuke's power overpowered Itachi's and that he was able to even break out of the Mangekyou Sharingan prowess of Itachi. And if that's the case, and Itachi didn't mean for Sasuke to break out of it, then I suppose Itachi would just show Sasuke a little bit of what would happen next, but the Tsukuyomi time wouldn't be so long, so he wouldn't win the fight outright, and he wouldn't torture Sasuke too much, otherwise he wouldn't even be able to continue the fight. Because that's the thing, there's nothing saying that you have to torture somebody with Tsukuyomi, right? If you have complete control over the illusion, even time itself, then you can do whatever your imagination can create. It's just that the most efficient way for Itachi to win fights with Tsukuyomi is by torturing whoever he casts the jutsu against, because the mental strain somebody goes through after being tortured for days on end is going to end the fight, even though it didn't actually happen. However, what if I told you that the real power behind Tsukuyomi actually lies on its other applications, and not on just torturing the target? You see, the third time Itachi uses Tsukuyomi in the series, the one time he gets countered is very different. Not just because Tsukuyomi is actually countered, but also because how the jutsu itself worked. Both times when Itachi uses it in Naruto Part 1, whenever we're taken to the genjutsu realm, the characters become black and white in this uncanny way, signifying that, okay, this is an illusion, it's not actually happening. And in the anime, the sky also gets red. So it's very clear that, oh, okay, yeah, this is weird, it's not real, it's a genjutsu, it feels real, but it's actually Itachi's Tsukuyomi. However, you would imagine that for Itachi's torture to be more effective, making things look more realistic would even add to the effect, right? Because then whoever is being tortured is not even gonna try to think, okay, this is an illusion, nothing bad is happening, it's just in my mind. Because, you know, we're all black and white, the sky's red, obviously this is an illusion. And yeah, Kakashi even thinks the first time Tsukuyomi is cast on him that, oh, it doesn't matter how much I think this is not real, this is just an illusion, the pain hurts all the same. And that's the thing, the first two times Itachi uses the genjutsu, they're very blunt and straightforward, he's not trying to hide anything, it's very obvious he's doing the genjutsu to both Kakashi and Sasuke, unless the representation of that black and white color scheme is just for us, the readers, to understand it's an illusion, and the actual characters within Tsukuyomi are not seeing that, but I don't believe that's the case, because Naruto doesn't really tend to do that a whole lot. Usually what's on the page is actually in-universe as well. So the third time Itachi uses Tsukuyomi stands out because initially you don't know Sasuke's under Tsukuyomi, and you're supposed to think, oh damn, Itachi actually got his eye. That's pretty damn bad. How is that gonna work? It's even difficult to spot when Itachi casts Tsukuyomi on Sasuke that time. It happens right after their shuriken clash. But it's a you blink it and you miss it moment, and that's on purpose. You're supposed to feel like Sasuke's feeling during the fight. Oh god, I'm being trapped here, I lost my eye. Oh, wait, this is a genjutsu. And then when Sasuke breaks out of it and you understand he was under Tsukuyomi, that's a big hype moment because, oh god, Sasuke just countered Tsukuyomi, that's great! And the momentum of the battle shifts and you start to become more hopeful for Sasuke. But Itachi had a very clear intention when he used Tsukuyomi in such a disguised way, so to speak. He wanted to show Sasuke how to get the EMS and what could potentially happen to Sasuke if somebody else craved his Mangekyou Sharingan. After all, Itachi knew Toby/Madara as well as Danzo were around, and they really liked Sharingan. So better warn Sasuke about that in a way. And obviously for Itachi to do that, he would have to make sure the illusion would be subtle. Doing the very blunt, black and white torture chamber that he did in part 1 wouldn't work for his goals there. And at the end, Itachi's Tsukuyomi kinda works because Sasuke finds out how to implant the EMS, but then again, Obito would have told him about it anyway, so Itachi's plans for his final battles against Sasuke weren't exactly completely fulfilled because Sasuke eventually went with Obito. That's obviously not something Itachi wanted to do, but the thing is, you can do other things with Tsukuyomi. You don't have to necessarily use the jutsu to win fights in the blink of an eye by just looking at your opponent's eye. The utility for Tsukuyomi is actually possibly infinite. Let's just say it's a very good thing Itachi didn't have an EMS. Otherwise, if he could cast Tsukuyomi at will without going blind, he would still have to worry about running out of chakra, and Itachi doesn't have a whole lot of chakra. Even though he has more chakra than people might assume, he would still be able to cast Tsukuyomi many times. Several times a day, actually, and that could make Itachi just the most formidable threat in the shinobi world, if he so chose, I suppose, because he was a peaceful guy, quote-unquote. And then you may say, well, but winning fights in the blink of an eye sounds pretty good to me. How can Tsukuyomi be more broken than that? And for that, we're gonna have to take a little peek at that Itachi light novel where he uses Tsukuyomi in a very different way. You see, when Itachi was doing the little mess with the Uchiha clan, which was eventually called the Uchiha Clan Massacre, he had to kill his girlfriend, Izumi. And obviously Itachi wasn't too happy about that. He loved her, after all. And to make things less awful, I suppose, at least for her, he cast Tsukuyomi on Izumi before he would kill her. And with that Tsukuyomi, obviously he didn't torture Izumi. He actually used an illusion on her, where she became the quote-unquote main character of that genjutsu, and she saw her entire life, and even lived through her entire life with Itachi for decades, having children, being happy and everything else. It's kinda like what Madara wanted to do with the infinite Tsukuyomi. It's just that that was for one person, and she eventually dies of old age in the illusion. So for Izumi, she lived her entire life in the illusion. In the blink of an eye, she lived everything. She had all the experiences she would have lived in a happy life that Itachi provided to her, and after all those decades when she dies of old age, she comes back to reality after a split second, and she thanks Itachi for what he did, and then she actually just drops dead without Itachi having to kill her, because the mental strain of you living for decades in a mere instant probably would be too much for you to handle. So Itachi did this very nice gesture, and he also was very guilty about killing his girlfriend, so well, let's try to mitigate what I have to do a little bit. And I guess, if there's a way to die, that'll be the way, right? It's almost as if you live your entire life. Yeah, it's not true. You're in the Matrix, but you don't really know that. Especially if Itachi casts the genjutsu in a way that's going to be subtle, just like the way he cast it against Sasuke in their final fight. But what Itachi did there, and bear in mind, this is a light novel, so it's iffy to say the least, he could stretch the time within Tsukuyomi for decades. Like, what? Excuse me? That's absolutely insane. You may say, well, but showing somebody a happy life's not exactly that useful, is it? And I may counter by saying, maybe not. However, if you can show the person anything and stretch the time of the illusion like that, I can think of many usages for Tsukuyomi that are not exactly combat related. And that's when we get to, you don't understand how Tsukuyomi is broken. It goes way beyond just looking your opponent and GGing him. Because think about this for a second. If Itachi wants to, he can make somebody think something happened. He can brainwash people by using Tsukuyomi, and they will never know. And then you may say, well, isn't that Koto Matsukami? But no, Tsukuyomi Tsukuyomi would be even more effective because it actually shows the illusion and you live through that. Koto Matsukami, as we see in the 5 Kage Summit, can be broken out of. This, you don't really break out of because it actually brainwashes your mind by showing you stuff, but the genjutsu itself only lasts for a mere instant. For example, can you imagine Itachi casts a genjutsu on someone, and in that Tsukuyomi, Itachi makes the person see someone that they love being killed by a random person, and then Itachi actually kills that person in real life, but makes the other person think it was that other person, so Itachi incriminates somebody else by casting Tsukuyomi. And because you can create sensation so well, it's likely the target will never know he was under a genjutsu to begin with. Also, if we are talking about brainwashing, there are several brainwashing techniques that you can use to make somebody believe in whatever you want them to believe, and even work for you. And usually those things take time for you to accomplish. You have to break the subject's mind, and depending on who the subject is, that's gonna take a while. I'm not going to discuss the specific techniques that you can use to indoctrinate someone or brainwash someone because they can kind of demonetize the video, but let's just say Itachi could do those things that may take weeks, months, maybe years in the blink of an eye, and he could brainwash anyone essentially. I mean, imagine if someone like Hibiki had access to Tsukuyomi, that would be pretty freaking insane. Itachi was probably too noble to brainwash someone like that, even though I would think if Itachi were to do that with someone powerful like the leader of the Akatsuki, that would work out pretty well. And yes, Tsukuyomi would probably work on Nagato. The Rinnegan is not immune to genjutsu by default, just like a base Sharingan can break out of Tsukuyomi. Now, obviously, the real leader of the Akatsuki was Obito, so using Tsukuyomi to brainwash him wouldn't be the best way to go about it because he had a Mangekyou Sharingan and Itachi thought he was Madara, so he wouldn't even try because Itachi would think Madara, out of all people, would be able to counter that genjutsu. But still, can you imagine how powerful that is? You could do that to a Kage. You could control all 5 major nations by brainwashing their leaders with your Tsukuyomi. And of course, this would take a lot of time because you have to go around, actually get the Kages, cast Tsukuyomi on them. And yeah, I guess you could say there are people in the Naruto universe that would be able to resist the illusion of Tsukuyomi, even if you torture them like Itachi did to Kakashi. But the thing is, Kakashi's already a very powerful ninja with a lot of mental strength, and he got demolished by 3 days in Tsukuyomi. Even if you take some Giga Chad like Hashirama, for example, which I think would be able to endure 72 days of physical torture, if you were to torture Hashirama for like 10 years, I don't see a way he's not breaking. And when it comes to the brainwashing, the same thing applies. You have illimited time to accomplish your brainwashing. I guess you could say Izumi died at the end of the illusion, so maybe there's a time limit that you can stretch the illusion so the target doesn't die after the illusion ends. But regardless of the time limit, if you have at least 6 months, you would be able to brainwash pretty much anyone you encounter. And it wouldn't be the type of brainwashing that you are kind of controlling the other person with a jutsu or something like that. No, the person would actually be loyal to you and to your cause and to whatever you indoctrinate onto them in the Tsukuyomi illusion. And especially if you use a very realistic Tsukuyomi, that's gonna be even easier for you to accomplish. And this brainwashing thing is not even the only thing I can think of that makes Tsukuyomi that more broken. No, we also have the possibility of training. Now, we know mastering difficult skills takes time in the Naruto world. Naruto, the character, circumvented that by using the Shadow Clone Jutsu, creating an army of clones, and working on the jutsu with all his clones to essentially multiply the training time. That's how he learned the Rasen Shuriken. He probably wouldn't be able to learn that otherwise, at least up until he got 6 Paths powers, because that makes his training so much faster. But in Tsukuyomi, if you cast a genjutsu, then the target has pretty much unlimited time to practice in the genjutsu realm. Now, you may say that Itachi would have to replicate the effects of the jutsu the target is trying to practice, and so it wouldn't be as easy. Like, can Itachi completely replicate how the usage of the jutsu feels like, what you feel like when you're improving, provide this manufactured feedback loop to the target as he is practicing the jutsu more and more so that he learns and advances in the technique. I don't know, I think that's a little bit of a stretch, especially if Itachi does not know the technique the target is trying to learn. But even if you can't master a new jutsu within Tsukuyomi, you can probably at least get better at taijutsu and more basic stuff. Things that Itachi would be able to replicate much better, and I don't see why Itachi wouldn't just be able to let the target quote-unquote be free in the Tsukuyomi realm as Itachi spars against him so that they can both get some practice in. Another way you could use Tsukuyomi is to relay information to someone else. Yeah, it seems a little trivial. Oh, are you going to use a Mangekyou Sharingan ability that makes you blind just to give information to someone? And yeah, it wouldn't be the most effective usage of Tsukuyomi, I would say. However, if Itachi had an EMS, that wouldn't be a problem. But can you imagine how useful Tsukuyomi could be to relay information to someone without having to say anything? You just look into the person's eye, you cast Tsukuyomi, you can have yourself talk to the other person in the Tsukuyomi illusion about the information you wanted to pass along, or you can even show like infographics, you can show what actually happened if you have the memory of it. Itachi kinda does that to Sasuke as the Edo Tensei of Itachi is about to fade away. Itachi shows everything that happened to him, Danzo, the Uchiha clan massacre. That wasn't Tsukuyomi though, that was basic Sharingan genjutsu. So yeah, you could do with Sharingan genjutsu, but if you're in a pinch and you have to do that very quickly, or if you're mid-battle and you have to convey some information to your allies, and you just don't have time to cast a regular genjutsu to, go over the explanation, you just cast Tsukuyomi, you can take whatever time you want, explaining detail by detail of whatever information you have to convey, and that's it. It's only gonna last a mere instant in the real world, and that's not even going to affect the fight itself. It's just that your ally is gonna have more information now. Can you imagine Itachi with a hypothetical EMS in the written test of the Chunin exams? If Naruto was his teammate, Itachi would just have to make eye contact with Naruto, and he could give Naruto all the answers. Now yes, Naruto would still have to memorize the answers, but Itachi can take hours and hours inside Tsukuyomi to drill them into Naruto's brain, and yeah, that may be torturous for Naruto, so you could argue this is a malicious usage of Tsukuyomi, but it's for them to pass the exams, and maybe you could also argue that Naruto wouldn't even be able to memorize them after several hours or even days inside Tsukuyomi, so maybe this ability wouldn't be very useful for Naruto, but if Itachi had any other teammate in the written test, then yeah, that'd be perfect. He just has to make eye contact, and it seems like the proctors weren't really caring if people looked around. Or even alternatively, he could just use Tsukuyomi to brainwash the proctors and make Itachi pass by default. So why doesn't Itachi do that? Well, Tsukuyomi has its limitations, especially when you don't have an EMS. Itachi clearly uses his Mangekyou abilities pretty sparingly, and we see when Sasuke starts to spam them in the 5 Kage Summit, he starts to lose his sight very quickly. Itachi would obviously not want to do that, and even though using Tsukuyomi to brainwash people would be a great usage of it, if he were to choose people to brainwash with Tsukuyomi, they would be Danzo and Obito, and they both have Mangekyou Sharingans and can possibly counter Tsukuyomi like they're the worst possible targets for it. Now, could Itachi have done the brainwashing thing to stop the Uchiha clan massacre? That's the question. I would say, maybe? Itachi had the Mangekyou Sharingan when he slaughtered the Uchiha clan. He even uses a Mangekyou Sharingan genjutsu on Sasuke when he opens the door and sees his parents dead and everything. Now, that's definitely not Tsukuyomi because Sasuke only sees it one time. He doesn't get absolutely tortured or anything. Or maybe it was Tsukuyomi, but it was like a 5-minute Tsukuyomi, which wouldn't be very interesting for Itachi to do because why would he spend his Mangekyou powers to do something a regular genjutsu would do just fine? And the problem was that Itachi knew that he would have limited usages of his Mangekyou Sharingan anyway. So if he started to spam Tsukuyomi on people to try and brainwash them, number one, he wasn't nearly as experienced with the Mangekyou Sharingan back then because he awakened it when Shisui died, and he died like a few weeks at most before the Uchiha clan massacre. And you learn how to use your Mangekyou abilities by using them. You don't really practice them because that would be stupid. If you were to just practice your Mangekyou Sharingan, you just run out of light and get blind without using it in combat. So you'd have to learn as you go, and maybe he just didn't even think of that possibility because maybe he didn't know how to brainwash someone. Even though Itachi's a smart guy, he would be able to figure out if he put his head to it. But because the Mangekyou Mangekyou Sharingan is nerfed by the whole going blind thing, Itachi definitely cannot spam it very often. And that's a good thing, because if he got an EMS, if Itachi was actually evil and wasn't sick, and got Sasuke's Mangekyou Sharingan into himself, awakened the EMS, he would become a very big problem. Not just because of how he could use Tsukuyomi like this, but also because he would eventually awaken a perfect Susanoo with a Yara mirror and the Totsuka blade. And if you're gonna find out how things would unfold if that was the case, you can watch the video showing up on your screen right now. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, ring notifications, those two things really help me out. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching.